The soft glow of my phone illuminated my face in the darkness of my cramped studio apartment. Outside, rain pattered against the window, creating that hollow, lonely sound I'd grown accustomed to during late nights. My fingers hovered over the screen as I fought against the exhaustion pulling at my eyelids. 3 jobs, a 4-year-old daughter, and not enough hours in the day had become my reality. Jake, I know it's late, but Lily's fever is back. 102.3. The pharmacy closed early. Do you still have those children's Tylenol from last time? I can't afford another ER visit this month. I hit send, then set my phone down, pressing my palms against my tired eyes. I glanced over at Lily, her chestnut curls spread across her pillow, cheeks flushed with fever. The weight of single motherhood had never felt heavier. Jake, my ex, Lily's father, had been increasingly unreliable, but he occasionally remembered we existed, especially when it suited him. Tonight, I was desperate enough to reach out, something I hated doing. My phone buzzed, and I snatched it up, surprised at the quick response. I think you have the wrong number. I squinted at the screen, checking the contact information. In my exhaustion, I'd mistyped the last digit. Heat rushed to my face despite being alone. Great. Just great. I'm so sorry, I typed back quickly. You're right. Wrong number. I was about to set my phone down when it buzzed again. Is your child sick? The simple question caught me off guard. People didn't do this, show interest in strangers' problems, especially not at 11:37 p.m. on a Tuesday. Yes, but it's not your concern. Sorry to bother you. Another quick response. There's an all-night pharmacy on Westlake and 5th. They'll have what you need. I stared at the message, my brow furrowing. The pharmacy he mentioned was in the expensive part of town, at least 30 minutes away by bus. Assuming any were still running this late. Thanks, but that's across town. I don't have a car tonight. I hesitated before adding, we'll manage. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. What's your address? The question sent a chill down my spine. What kind of person asks a stranger for their address in the middle of the night? I set the phone down without responding, suddenly aware of how quiet my apartment was, how thin the walls, how flimsy the lock on my door. 10 minutes passed while I sat beside Lily, gently placing a damp cloth on her forehead. She whimpered in her sleep, breaking my heart. My phone remained silent, and I started to relax, convincing myself the strange exchange was over. Then came a sharp knock at my door. My heart leaped to my throat. I froze, hoping I'd imagined it, but the knock came again, more insistent this time. I crept to the peephole, my pulse thundering in my ears. A man stood outside, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in what appeared to be an expensive dark suit, despite the late hour. Behind him, I could make out another man, larger, standing at attention near the stairwell. The first man held a small white paper bag in his hand. I can hear you breathing through the door, he said, his voice surprisingly soft yet commanding. I've brought medication for your daughter. I swallowed hard. How did you find my address? I never told you. A pause. I have resources. Open the door, or don't, but your daughter needs this. Doesn't she? His tone wasn't threatening, but there was something about the certainty in his voice that made my skin prickle. I glanced back at Lily, her small chest rising and falling unevenly in her fevered sleep. Making a decision I wasn't sure was wise, I unlatched the chain, keeping the door open just enough to see him properly. Up close, he was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp features that might have been sculpted from marble. Dark hair, immaculately styled despite the rain outside. His eyes, a piercing gray blue, assessed me with unsettling intensity. How did you find me? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. He extended the bag through the gap in the door. Your area code narrowed it down. The rest was simple. Nothing about this felt simple. Who are you? Someone who doesn't like to see children suffer. His mouth curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Take it. There's Tylenol, electrolyte solution, and fever patches. I hesitated before accepting the bag, our fingers brushing briefly. His were unexpectedly warm. Thank you, I said cautiously. But this doesn't explain how you found my exact apartment. He tilted his head slightly. The pharmacy delivered it to me. I brought it to you. It was a lie. A smooth, practiced one, but a lie nonetheless. No pharmacy delivery person would have given my address to a stranger, and certainly not at this hour. Behind him, the second man shifted, and I caught a glimpse of what looked like a holster under his jacket. My breath caught. "You should give her the medication now," the man at my door said, his gaze drifting past me toward the interior of my apartment. "Her fever won't wait for your suspicions to settle." I clutched the bag tighter. "Right. Thank you again." As I began to close the door, his hand shot out, catching it effortlessly. His fingers, adorned with a single platinum ring, contrasted against the cheap peeling paint. "What's your name?" he asked. Something told me lying would be pointless. "Emma. Emma Reese. Emma." He said my name as if tasting it. "I'm Alexander. Take care of your daughter, Emma. I might check in tomorrow to see how she's doing." It wasn't a request. It wasn't even really a statement. It was somewhere between a promise and a warning. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and he released the door, allowing me to close it. I quickly secured the chain and deadbolt, then leaned against the door, my heart racing. Through the peephole, I watched as he straightened his already perfect cuffs, said something inaudible to the other man, and walked away with the unhurried confidence of someone who owned not just the building, but the entire block. Only when I heard the distant purr of what could only be an expensive car engine did I exhale fully. I opened the bag with trembling hands. Inside was exactly what he'd said. Children's Tylenol, Pedialyte, and fever patches from an upscale pharmacy I'd never entered, because everything there cost 3 times what I could afford. There was also a business card. Black, with only a phone number embossed in silver. No name, no company. I administered the medicine to Lily, who swallowed it drowsily before drifting back to sleep. Within the hour, her fever began to break, her breathing becoming more regular. Relief washed over me, but it was tangled with unease. How powerful must someone be to track down a stranger's address from a wrong number? And why would such a person bother with a single mother and her sick child in a rundown apartment building? Morning came, and with it, clarity. Last night had been a fever dream of my own, the result of exhaustion and maternal worry. No one had actually tracked me down from a text message. That wasn't possible, was it? The medicine, the business card. I must have gone out and purchased them myself, then forgotten in my sleep-deprived state. But the black card with the silver number sat on my nightstand. Very real. Very present. Lily was better, playing quietly with her worn stuffed rabbit while I made breakfast, just toast and jam, but it was something. My phone buzzed. How is she? I stared at the unfamiliar number, the same one I'd accidentally texted last night. This was real then. Before I could respond, another message appeared. "I'm outside. I brought breakfast." My head snapped up, eyes darting to the window. From my 5th-floor apartment, I could just see the street below, where a sleek black Bentley idled, looking as out of place in my neighborhood as a swan in a mud puddle. My phone buzzed again. "Don't make me come up, Emma. It's better if your neighbors don't see me at your door in daylight." The implication sent a shiver through me. Who was this man that his presence would be dangerous for me? And yet, he'd helped me, hadn't he? "Mommy, I'm hungry," Lily said, tugging at my worn robe. Her fever was gone, her eyes bright again. The medicine had worked. I made a decision then, one that would alter the course of my life in ways I couldn't begin to imagine. I took Lily's hand. "We're going downstairs for breakfast, sweetie. Someone brought us food." The elevator was broken, as it had been for months, so we took the stairs. Each step down felt like moving closer to something I shouldn't touch, couldn't understand, but was powerless to resist. Like approaching the event horizon of a black hole, where the normal rules of existence began to warp and stretch. Outside, the morning was crisp and bright, a stark contrast to last night's rain. The black Bentley gleamed in the sunlight. As we approached, the rear door opened. Alexander stepped out, looking even more imposing in daylight. His suit today was navy, clearly tailored to fit his broad shoulders and lean frame perfectly. The watch on his wrist probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. "Good morning, Emma." His eyes, those unsettling gray-blue pools, moved to Lily, who partially hid behind my leg. His expression softened marginally. "And you must be Lily." I tightened my grip on Lily's hand. "How do you know her name?" "You mentioned it in your text." His answer was smooth, immediate. "The fever's gone, I see." I nodded, suddenly aware of my appearance. Unwashed hair piled into a messy bun, faded pajama pants visible beneath my threadbare coat, dark circles under my eyes. Alexander, by contrast, looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. "Thank you for the medicine," I said, trying to maintain some dignity. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to." He opened the car door wider. "Breakfast?" Through the open door, I could see a spread of pastries, fruit, and what smelled like premium coffee on a fold-out table inside the spacious vehicle. Lily's eyes widened. "Mommy, look. Croissants." Her excitement was palpable. Croissants were a luxury we never indulged in. "We can't," I began, but Alexander cut me off. "Actually, you can. It's just breakfast, Emma." But something told me it wasn't just breakfast. Nothing with this man would ever be just anything. Alexander's driver, the same large man I'd seen outside my door last night, stood at attention nearby, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. A second man I hadn't noticed before leaned against another black car parked a few spaces away, pretending to check his phone while clearly monitoring the street. "Are you afraid of something?" I asked, nodding toward the men. Alexander's smile was subtle, almost predatory. "Caution isn't fear, Emma. It's intelligence." He looked down at Lily, who was still eyeing the pastries. "Your daughter's hungry." It wasn't a question. Nothing with him seemed to be. I hesitated a moment longer before surrendering to Lily's pleading eyes and my own curiosity. "Fine. Just breakfast." The interior of the Bentley was another world. Buttery leather seats, wood paneling that gleamed with rich polish, and that indefinable scent of luxury I'd only experienced in department stores I couldn't afford to shop in. Alexander sat opposite us, leaving generous space that somehow still felt intimate in the confines of the vehicle. Lily reached eagerly for a chocolate croissant, then paused, looking at me for permission. "Go ahead, sweetheart," I said softly. Alexander watched Lily take her first bite, a strange expression crossing his face. Something almost like longing, quickly masked. "You have a beautiful daughter," he said, his eyes moving back to me with an intensity that made me look away. "She has your eyes." I took a sip of the coffee he offered. Rich, complex, nothing like the instant coffee I rationed at home. "Why are you doing this, Alexander? People don't track down wrong numbers to deliver medicine and breakfast." "Perhaps I'm not most people." He poured himself coffee, his movements precise, controlled. "Tell me about yourself, Emma Reese." "Single mother, multiple jobs from the look of your hands, living in an apartment with security issues in a neighborhood that doesn't deserve you." I glanced down at my hands, chapped from dishwashing at the diner, cuticles ragged from lack of care. Heat rose to my cheeks. "Those are observations, not knowledge," I countered. "And you haven't answered my question. Let's say I was intrigued. Wrong numbers are usually quickly forgotten. But a mother desperate to help her child?" He leaned forward slightly. That caught my attention. Most people would have just said, "wrong number," and gone back to sleep. I've established I'm not most people. His gaze traveled over my face, lingering in a way that made me suddenly conscious of every flaw, every sign of exhaustion. "You don't accept help easily, do you?" I watched Lily happily devouring her second pastry, powdered sugar dusting her cheeks. "I've learned that help usually comes with conditions. Wise." He nodded approvingly. "But sometimes, Emma, coincidences are just that. Happy accidents that bring people together who might otherwise never meet." I didn't believe in coincidences anymore, and something about the calculated look in his eyes told me he didn't either. "What do you do, Alexander? For work, I mean." I tried to sound casual, but we both knew it was anything but. "I manage interests." He took a sip of his coffee. "Family interests, primarily." "That's not an answer." It's the only one you need right now. The subtle warning in his tone made me drop the subject. I focused on my coffee instead, trying to ignore how his eyes never left my face. Your ex, Jake, was it? He doesn't help with Lily? The question startled me. How did you... I stopped, remembering my text. Right, not enough. No, he's unreliable. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Men who abandon their responsibilities to their children are worse than animals. Animals at least protect their young. There was something in his voice, a cold, controlled fury that suggested personal history. We manage, I said quietly. Barely. The truth of his assessment stung. I straightened my shoulders. I should get Lily ready for preschool, and I have a shift at the diner at 9. Cancel it. I blinked. Excuse me? Cancel your shift. I need an assistant today. He pulled out a phone, not the sleek smartphone I'd expected, but a simpler model, clearly used for specific purposes. My usual one is indisposed. I can't just cancel. I need the money, and they'll fire me. They won't. His certainty was unnerving. I'll pay you 5 times whatever you'd make at the diner. Why would you? I have meetings. I need someone to take notes, look presentable, and not ask questions during the meetings. You're intelligent, observant, and discreet. He gestured to Lily. And your daughter can spend the day with Mrs. Kozlov, my housekeeper. She raised 5 children of her own. Lily will be safe. You expect me to leave my daughter with a complete stranger? No. I expect you to bring her with us to my home, meet Mrs. Kozlov, and then make your decision. He leaned back, his expression unreadable. Unless you prefer to work 3 jobs that barely cover your expenses while your daughter attends a preschool with peeling lead paint on the walls. I stiffened. How do you know about her preschool? He ignored the question. One day, Emma. Good pay, better food than that diner serves, and a chance to see if there might be a more permanent arrangement that could benefit you both. I knew I should say no. Everything about this screamed danger, crossed boundaries, and power imbalance. But the harsh reality of my bank account, the approaching rent deadline, and Lily's preschool fees weighed heavily. Just for today, I said finally. And I meet this Mrs. Kozlov first. His smile was triumphant, but restrained, as if he'd known my answer before I did. Excellent. The driver started the car without Alexander saying a word. As we pulled away from my apartment building, I felt a distinct sensation of leaving something behind. Not just my neighborhood, but perhaps my old life entirely. Alexander's home wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined a sleek downtown penthouse, all glass and steel. Instead, we drove 30 minutes outside the city to a gated estate, nestled among old-growth trees. The house itself was stately, but not ostentatious. A modern interpretation of a traditional manor, with clean lines and large windows. Security was evident everywhere. Cameras discreetly positioned, men stationed at strategic points around the perimeter, a gatehouse with a guard who checked beneath our vehicle with a mirror before allowing us through. Caution. Not fear? I asked with raised eyebrows. Alexander's mouth quirked. Precisely. Inside, the home was warm, surprisingly comfortable despite its obvious luxury. Mrs. Kozlov turned out to be a formidable Russian woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and capable hands. She spoke to Lily in a gentle voice, showing her a room filled with toys, some new, some clearly treasured from another era. My grandchildren visit less now, she explained to me in accented English. Too busy. The toys need a child's touch. While Lily explored, Mrs. Kozlov pulled me aside. Mr. Sokolov is good man, she said firmly. Tough, yes. Dangerous to enemies, yes, but loyal to family, to those under his protection. She patted my hand. You are under his protection now. This is good for you. For little one. Her words should have alarmed me, but instead, they sparked an unexpected warmth. Protection was something I'd lacked for so long that the mere suggestion of it felt like a luxury greater than the house around us. I'll be back soon, I promised Lily, who was already engrossed in a dollhouse that probably cost more than all her possessions combined. She will not even notice you gone, Mrs. Kozlov assured me. We make cookies, yes? You like cookies, little one? Lily nodded enthusiastically, already won over. Alexander led me to another wing of the house, to a room that had clearly been prepared for me. A sleek charcoal dress in exactly my size hung on a display, alongside accessories and shoes that somehow matched my style while being infinitely more expensive than anything I'd ever owned. "How did you know my size?" I asked, fingering the fine fabric. "I noticed details," he said simply. "Change quickly. We leave in 20 minutes. Left alone, I slipped into the dress, shocked at the perfect fit. The woman in the mirror looked like me, but elevated. A version of Emma Reese who hadn't spent years struggling, who had been given opportunities instead of obstacles. When I emerged, Alexander was waiting in the hallway, his eyes darkening as they traveled slowly from my face down to my shoes and back up. "Perfect," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "You clean up well, Emma." The compliment, delivered with such raw appreciation, sent heat spreading across my skin. The meetings that day were held in private rooms of exclusive establishments. A members-only club, a restaurant with no signage, the back office of a high-end jewelry store. I took notes as instructed, speaking only when spoken to, observing the deference shown to Alexander by everyone we encountered. These weren't ordinary business meetings. The conversations were coded, references made to shipments, territories, and arrangements that clearly meant something specific to the participants. Money changed hands, not directly, but through subtle references to transfers and accounts. I wasn't naive. I recognized what I was witnessing. Even if the specifics remained vague, Alexander Sokolov wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful in a way that existed outside normal societal structures. Between meetings, in the car, he asked me questions about my background, my education, a nursing degree, partially completed before Lily's birth. My relationship with Jake, brief, intense, ultimately betraying. He listened with undivided attention, asking follow-up questions that suggested genuine interest rather than mere politeness. "You should have been more than this," he said, as we drove to our final meeting. "A woman with your intelligence, your resilience." "Life doesn't always give us what we deserve," I replied. "No," he agreed. "Which is why sometimes we must take it for ourselves." The last meeting was different. We entered a private dining room in a restaurant so exclusive I hadn't even heard of it. 3 men waited. Older, expensively dressed, with hard eyes that assessed me immediately. "Who's this?" one asked, not bothering to hide his suspicion. "My assistant," Alexander replied coolly. "She has my complete confidence." The statement hung in the air, laden with meaning beyond the words themselves. The men exchanged glances but said nothing further about my presence. The meeting was tense, filled with undercurrents I couldn't fully grasp. One man repeatedly referred to Chicago and expanded operations, while another argued for traditional territories. Alexander mainly listened, occasionally asking a pointed question that redirected the conversation. I noticed his hands, those elegant, strong hands with the single platinum ring, remained flat on the table throughout, never fidgeting, never revealing tension. Only the subtle tightening around his eyes betrayed his displeasure at certain points. When we left, Alexander was quiet, a controlled stillness about him that felt more dangerous than any obvious anger. "Did I do something wrong?" I asked as we slid into the Bentley. "No." His answer was clipped. "You were perfect." We rode in silence back to his home. It was early evening now, the day having passed in a blur of luxury, power plays, and unspoken tensions. I found Lily in the kitchen with Mrs. Kozloff, helping to knead dough for what appeared to be dinner rolls. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months. "Mommy, we made cookies and bread and Mrs. K says I'm a natural baker." Her face was smudged with flour, her eyes bright with excitement. "She has good hands," Mrs. Kozloff confirmed, gentle but strong. Alexander watched this exchange from the doorway, that same strange expression crossing his face, longing, perhaps, or nostalgia. When he caught me observing him, his features smoothed back into their usual controlled mask. "You'll stay for dinner," he said. Not a question. The meal was surprisingly homey, Mrs. Kozloff's excellent cooking served in a comfortable dining room rather than the formal one I'd glimpsed earlier. Lily chattered happily, Alexander listening with unexpected patience, asking her questions about her day, her favorite stories, her stuffed rabbit, named Mr. Flopsy. As promised, he paid me, an envelope containing far more cash than 5 times my diner shift would have earned. I can't accept this much, I protested. You can. You will. His tone brooked no argument. I have another proposition for you, Emma. And there it was, the condition I'd been waiting for, the price for his help. Block 3. Alexander led me to his study after Lily had fallen asleep on a plush sofa, exhausted from her day of baking and playing. Mrs. Kozlov had covered her with a soft blanket, promising to watch over her while we talked. The study was exactly what I'd expect from a man like Alexander. Leather-bound books lining rich wooden shelves, a massive desk of some exotic hardwood, and a decanter of amber liquid sitting atop a sideboard. The room smelled of leather, paper, and that distinctive cologne he wore, something expensive and subtle that I couldn't name, but had already come to associate with him. Drink? He offered, already pouring himself 2 fingers of what appeared to be scotch. I shook my head. I need a clear head for whatever you're about to propose. That earned me a slight smile. Smart girl. Woman, I corrected automatically. His eyes locked with mine, something approving in their depths. Woman, he acknowledged, inclining his head slightly. Forgive the imprecision. He gestured for me to sit in one of 2 leather chairs positioned near a fireplace, where embers glowed softly. When I did, he took the seat opposite me, studying my face in the warm light. You need a job, Emma. A real one. Not the piecemeal shifts that barely cover your expenses. He took a measured sip of his drink. I need an executive assistant I can trust. I raised an eyebrow. Trust? You've known me for less than 24 hours. I'm an excellent judge of character. It's a necessary skill in my position. He leaned forward slightly. You're intelligent, observant, discreet. You handled yourself well today, and most importantly, you have something to protect, your daughter. That makes you careful, thorough. It also makes me vulnerable, I pointed out. We're all vulnerable in some way. The trick is to align yourself with someone whose strengths protect your vulnerabilities. His voice lowered. I can offer you that protection, Emma. The proposition hung in the air between us. I knew I should decline immediately. Everything about this situation screamed danger. The coded meetings, the security personnel, Mrs. Kozlov's casual reference to Alexander being dangerous to enemies. Yet I couldn't bring myself to say no. Not yet. What exactly would this job entail? I asked instead. Managing my schedule, handling correspondence, attending meetings with me, keeping records. He took another sip of scotch. Nothing illegal if that's your concern. The position comes with a salary that would triple your current combined income, health insurance for both you and Lily, and a car at your disposal. My heart skipped. Health insurance alone would be life-changing. Lily needed regular checkups, vaccinations, normal childhood medical care that currently strained my budget to breaking point. And what do you really want from me, Alexander? I asked directly. Men like you don't make offers like this without expecting something in return. His expression darkened. Men like me? Powerful. Dangerous. Used to getting what you want. He didn't deny it. What I want is competence, loyalty, and discretion. You possess all 3. You can't know that. I can. He set his glass down. Your ex, Jake Thompson, 29, currently employed as a bouncer at the Red Door, when he's not dealing recreational pharmaceuticals on the side. He betrayed you, didn't he? Took your savings. Left you pregnant. My blood ran cold. How do you... Yet you never reported him to the police. Never pursued him for child support. Never exposed his side business to his legitimate employers. That's discretion, Emma. His eyes held mine. You work 3 jobs, rather than ask for help from the parents who disowned you when you chose to keep your child. That's loyalty to what matters to you. Each word felt like an invasion, as if he'd opened up my life like a book and was reading from it. You've been investigating me, thoroughly. He didn't even have the decency to look apologetic. I needed to know who I was dealing with. And I don't get the same courtesy? Anger flared, hot and sudden. You know everything about me, while I know nothing concrete about you. You know I'm dangerous, he said simply. You know I'm powerful. You know I can help you or harm you. What else matters? The truth matters, I insisted, leaning forward. Who are you really? What do you do that requires this level of security, these coded meetings? Are you a criminal? Alexander's expression remained impassive. The legal system and I have a complex relationship. I operate businesses that exist in gray areas, yes, but I harm no innocents. I don't deal in human trafficking or drugs. I have a code. A code, I repeated flatly. That's supposed to reassure me? It should. My code is what separates me from the animals in this world. He stood abruptly, moving to the window to look out into the darkness. You want truth? Here it is. My father built an empire through blood and will. I inherited it 5 years ago when he died. Not peacefully. I've spent those years securing my position, eliminating threats, expanding our legitimate businesses while gradually moving away from the more problematic ones. I watched his back, the tension visible in his shoulders despite the perfect cut of his suit. You're talking about organized crime. He turned, his face half in shadow. Some would use that term. The Mafia, I said bluntly. An outdated concept, but close enough for your purposes. He moved back toward me, his movements controlled and fluid. You deserve honesty, so here it is. I am a man with blood on his hands who is trying to build something legitimate for the future. I don't apologize for my past or present, but I have a vision for what comes next. The confession should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself oddly appreciative of his candor. Why me? I asked. There must be dozens of qualified assistants who would jump at this opportunity without asking uncomfortable questions. Something shifted in his expression. A softening around the eyes. A slight parting of his lips. Because when I saw you standing in your doorway last night, exhausted but still defiant, still protective of your child despite your fear, I recognized something. He paused, searching for the right word. Something kindred. He knelt suddenly before my chair, bringing his face level with mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. We're both survivors, Emma, both willing to do whatever it takes to protect what's ours. The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. No man had ever looked at me like this. Like I was simultaneously precious and dangerous. I need to think about it, I managed. He nodded once, then rose smoothly to his feet. Of course. Take tonight. I'll have a driver take you and Lily home. Actually, I said, surprising myself, if Mrs. Kozlov doesn't mind, I'd rather not wake Lily. Could we stay here tonight and leave in the morning? Something like triumph flashed in his eyes before he masked it. Of course. I'll have rooms prepared. The suite he led me to was larger than my entire apartment, with a connecting door to a smaller room where Mrs. Kozlov had already moved the sleeping Lily. I thanked him awkwardly at the door, hyper-aware of his proximity in the quiet hallway. One more thing, he said, his voice low. Jake Thompson. Has he threatened you in any way? The question caught me off guard. Not recently. He's been absent. Alexander's jaw tightened. If he ever does, you'll tell me immediately. It wasn't a request. I can handle Jake. You shouldn't have to. His eyes were cold now, his expression hard. No one threatens what's mine. The possessive statement hung between us, its implications staggering. I wasn't not his employee yet, certainly not his woman, yet the conviction in his voice suggested he already considered me under his protection, his territory. I should have been offended. Instead, a treacherous warmth spread through me at the idea of someone, anyone, caring enough to protect me after years of facing the world alone. Good night, Alexander, I said, stepping back into the room. Sleep well, Emma. His eyes lingered on my face a moment longer before he turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. I slept better that night than I had in years, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like clouds, in a room with no drafts, no sounds of neighbors arguing through thin walls, no worries about making rent. I woke to find Lily already up, chattering happily with Mrs. Kozlov as they prepared breakfast together. Mommy, Mrs. Kay is teaching me Russian, Lily exclaimed when she saw me, then proudly pronounced what sounded like Dobroye utro. Good morning, I assumed. Mrs. Kozlov beamed. She learns quick, this one. I didn't see Alexander at breakfast, and part of me was relieved. I needed space to think, to weigh my options without those penetrating eyes assessing my every reaction. After we ate, Mrs. Kozlov discreetly informed me that Alexander had been called away on business, but had left the promised car and driver to take us home whenever we wished. He also said to give you this, if you decide yes, she added, handing me a phone. Sleek, new, and undoubtedly secure. His number is programmed in. I haven't decided yet, I protested. Mrs. Kozlov just smiled knowingly. Keep phone anyway, for emergencies. I pocketed it, trying to ignore the implication that I'd already made my choice. The driver took us home in a less conspicuous but still luxurious Audi. As we approached my apartment building, I noticed a familiar figure loitering near the entrance. Jake, looking rougher than the last time I'd seen him, his once handsome face now gaunt, his movements jittery. Keep driving, I told the driver sharply. Circle the block. The driver, trained to follow instructions without question, complied immediately. Mommy, isn't that our building? Lily asked from her booster seat. Yes, sweetheart, but we need to run an errand first, I lied, mind racing. Jake showing up now, after months of silence, couldn't be coincidence. Had he somehow found out about Alexander? About the money I'd been paid? I pulled out the phone Mrs. Kozlov had given me, staring at it for a long moment before making my decision. I found Alexander's number and typed a message. Jake is at my apartment. This isn't normal. I can't go home with Lily while he's there. The response came instantly. Where are you now? In the car, circling the block. Go to the cafe on Maple and 3rd. Wait inside. 20 minutes. I relayed the instructions to the driver, who nodded and smoothly changed course. The cafe was a small, unremarkable place I'd passed many times but never entered, too expensive for my budget. Inside, I ordered Lily a hot chocolate, and myself a coffee I didn't really want, my eyes constantly darting to the door, watching for Jake. Exactly 18 minutes later, Alexander walked in. He wore no suit today. Instead, dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look both more approachable and more dangerous. His eyes found me immediately, something primal and protective flashing in them as he noted Lily beside me. He slid into the booth next to me, close enough that his thigh pressed against mine. Tell me everything, he said, his voice low. I explained Jake's sudden appearance, his deteriorated state, my fear that he might be using again, and what that could mean for his behavior, his desperation. Alexander listened intently, his expression darkening. This ends today, he said finally. Fear spiked through me. What does that mean? It means you need to make your decision, Emma. His eyes held mine. Are you mine to protect or not? The possessive language again, mine. But now it felt less like a claim and more like an offer. A choice. I don't want him hurt, I said quietly. He's Lily's father, whatever else he's done. Alexander's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. For Lily's sake, then, not his. He stood abruptly. Wait here. I'll handle this, and then we'll get your things. Get my things? You can't stay there anymore. It's not safe. The finality in his tone brooked no argument. I have a property, a townhouse near the Good School district. It's vacant, secure. Alexander, I can't just— You can. You will. His eyes softened slightly as they moved to Lily, who was happily drawing on a napkin with crayons the waitress had brought her. For her. He left before I could respond, several of his men materializing outside the cafe, as if they'd been there all along, waiting for his signal. I sat frozen, knowing I'd reached a turning point. To accept Alexander's protection meant entering his world fully. A world of power, danger, and moral gray areas I'd never navigated before. To refuse meant returning to my struggle, my vulnerability, my constant fear of not being enough for Lily. The phone in my pocket felt heavy, symbolic. I pulled it out and typed a single word. Yes. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind. The townhouse Alexander provided was beautiful. 3 bedrooms, a small garden, secure parking, and an alarm system that would have intimidated a professional thief. More importantly, it was within walking distance of a prestigious preschool where Lily now attended, her tuition mysteriously covered by scholarship, according to the director who welcomed us warmly, as if we'd always belonged there. My new role as Alexander's executive assistant was both simpler and more complex than I'd anticipated. The work itself, managing his legitimate business calendar, arranging travel, drafting correspondence, was straightforward enough. I'd always been organized, detail-oriented. What complicated matters was Alexander himself. He maintained a careful professional distance during working hours, treating me with impeccable respect. But his eyes told a different story. Following me when he thought I wasn't looking, darkening when I leaned over his desk to show him something on my tablet. Lingering on my lips when I spoke during meetings. The tension between us was a living thing, growing stronger with each passing day. Neither of us acknowledged it directly, but we both felt it. The gravitational pull that made me hyper-aware of his presence, that drew me toward him despite my better judgment. Jake had disappeared after whatever conversation he'd had with Alexander that day at the cafe. All Alexander would tell me was, he understood the situation and accepted financial assistance to seek treatment in another state. I didn't press for details. Part of me didn't want to know exactly what understanding the situation had entailed. I was at my desk outside Alexander's office, finalizing arrangements for an upcoming trip to Chicago, when his private line rang, the one only a select few people had the number to. "Mr. Sokolov's office?" I answered professionally. "Who is this?" The female voice was sharp, suspicious, with the same faint accent that occasionally colored Alexander's speech when he was tired or angry. "Emma Reese, Mr. Sokolov's executive assistant. How may I help you?" A pause. "Tell Alexander his mother is arriving tomorrow. 6 o'clock. Dinner at 8. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat frozen for a moment, processing this new information. In 3 weeks, Alexander had never once mentioned his family, beyond the vague reference to his father's death. I'd begun to think he had none. I knocked softly on his office door, entering when he called out. Alexander was standing at the window, phone to his ear, speaking rapid-fire in what I assumed was Russian. He turned when I entered, his brow furrowing at whatever he saw in my expression. He ended his call abruptly. "What's happened?" he asked. "Your mother just called. She's arriving tomorrow at 6 and expects dinner at 8. I watched his face carefully, noting how it momentarily hardened before he controlled his reaction. "I see." He ran a hand through his dark hair, the only sign of agitation he ever permitted himself. "Make reservations at Eloise. Private room. She sounded like she expected dinner here," I ventured. "At your home." His jaw tightened. "My mother often expects things she doesn't receive." He turned back to the window. "Make the reservation, Emma." The dismissal was clear, but something made me push further. "Is everything all right?" He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke without turning. "My mother and I have a complicated relationship. She didn't approve of the direction I've taken our family businesses. She preferred my father's more traditional approach." "More violent, you mean?" I said softly. Now he did turn, his eyes sharp. "Yes. My efforts to legitimize our interests displease her. She considers it weakness." The revelation stunned me. I'd assumed Alexander's mother would be relieved at his attempts to move away from criminal enterprises, not disappointed. "I'll make the reservation," I said, retreating toward the door. "Emma." His voice stopped me. "Tomorrow night. I want you there." My pulse quickened. "At the dinner? With your mother?" "Yes." His expression was unreadable. "Wear the blue dress I had sent over last week, the sapphire one." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The dress in question was the most beautiful thing I'd ever owned, midnight blue silk that hugged my curves before flowing gracefully to the floor, with a neckline that dipped just low enough to be elegant rather than revealing. I'd wondered when I would have occasion to wear it. Now I knew. The next evening found me seated beside Alexander in a private dining room at Eloise, the city's most exclusive restaurant. The room was intimate, just a single table set for 3, with low lighting and discreet service. Alexander had been quiet during the drive, tension radiating from him despite his outwardly calm demeanor. When Irina Sokolov entered, I understood immediately where Alexander had inherited his commanding presence. Though she must have been in her 60s, she moved with the fluid grace of a much younger woman, her silver-streaked black hair swept into a perfect chignon, her slim figure adorned in what was undoubtedly a couture suit. Her eyes, the same striking gray-blue as her son's, assessed me instantly, missing nothing. Alexander rose, kissing her formally on both cheeks. "Mother." "Alexander." She returned the greeting coolly before turning her attention fully to me. "And this is?" "Emma Reese." "My executive assistant." Alexander placed a hand lightly at the small of my back as I stood to greet her. "Emma, my mother, Irina Sokolov." I extended my hand, which she took briefly, her grip surprisingly strong. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Sokolov." "Ms.," she corrected sharply. I resumed my own name after my husband's unfortunate departure. The phrasing sent a chill through me. Not death or passing, departure, as if Nikolai Sokolov had simply stepped out rather than been killed. We sat, and a waiter appeared instantly to pour champagne. Irina continued to study me with unsettling intensity. "Executive assistant," she repeated, her accent more pronounced than Alexander's. "Is that what they call it these days?" Alexander's hand tightened around his champagne flute. "Mother." The warning in his tone only seemed to amuse her. "Oh, come now, Alexander. I raised no fool. This woman," she gestured to me with a manicured hand, "is clearly more than just your assistant. The way you look at her, the way you touch her," her eyes narrowed. "The question is whether she's merely warming your bed, or if you've developed a genuine weakness for her." Heat rushed to my face. Miss Sokolov, I assure you." "Don't bother, dear. I don't care about denials or explanations." She sipped her champagne. "I care only about whether you're a liability to my son and our family interests. That's enough." Alexander's voice was dangerously soft. "Emma is under my protection. That should tell you everything you need to know." Irina's eyebrows rose slightly. "Under your protection? That's quite a declaration." Her gaze returned to me. "And what did you do to earn such a privilege, Ms. Reese?" Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't make matters worse, Alexander cut in smoothly. "Mother, I believe you mentioned business to discuss. Perhaps we should attend to that rather than interrogating my staff." Irina smiled thinly. "Of course." She set down her glass. "Chicago is becoming problematic. The Donovan family is expanding into our territory, claiming we've abandoned traditional operations there. They see your legitimate businesses as weakness, just as I warned you they would." Alexander's expression didn't change, but I felt him tense beside me. The Donovans are dinosaurs. They don't understand that the future lies in legitimate enterprise, not street-level operations that draw law enforcement attention. Perhaps. But dinosaurs can still bite, and the Donovans have very sharp teeth. Irina leaned forward. 3 of our distribution centers were hit last week. 2 managers hospitalized. They're testing you, Alexander. I kept my expression neutral, though my mind was racing. Despite my growing awareness of Alexander's world, the blunt discussion of what sounded like gang warfare was jarring. "I'm aware of the situation," Alexander replied coldly. "It's being handled." "By whom? That soft-hearted underboss you installed? Mikhail would never have allowed—" "Mikhail is dead," Alexander interrupted sharply, "along with his outdated methods. I won't revert to my father's tactics simply because the Donovans are stuck in the last century." Irina's eyes flashed. "Your father built an empire with those tactics, and nearly destroyed it with them as well." Alexander's voice remained controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. We were losing ground to federal investigations, internal betrayals, and rival families who saw his brutality as weakness rather than strength. The tension between mother and son crackled in the air. I sat motionless, feeling like a spectator at a dangerous game whose rules I didn't fully understand. "You have a child, I understand," Irina said suddenly, turning back to me. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. "Yes, a daughter, Lily. She's 4. "And her father?" "Not in the picture," I replied stiffly. "How convenient." Irina's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Children are powerful leverage, Ms. Reese. I hope you understand that by entering Alexander's world, you've placed your daughter in a very exposed position." My blood ran cold. Was she threatening Lily? Alexander must have thought so too, because he set down his glass with enough force that the champagne sloshed over the rim. "That's enough, Mother. You will never speak of Emma's daughter again. Not as leverage, not as a casual topic of conversation. She is off limits in every possible way." His voice was deadly quiet. Am I absolutely clear? For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross Irina's face. "Crystal," she replied, lifting her glass again. "Though I'm merely pointing out the reality of our world, something you seem increasingly eager to deny." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of tense conversation, veiled references to family business, and cutting remarks from Irina that Alexander largely ignored. I said little, observing the complex dynamic between mother and son, her pushing for a return to traditional criminal operations, him firmly maintaining his course toward legitimacy. By the time we left the restaurant, my nerves were frayed. Alexander guided me to the car with a hand at my elbow, his touch gentle despite the tension radiating from him. His mother had already departed in her own vehicle, after a coolly formal goodbye. Once we were alone in the back of the Bentley, Alexander let out a long breath, some of the rigidity leaving his shoulders. "I apologize for my mother. She was testing you." "Testing me?" I turned to look at him in the dim light of the car. "By threatening my child? She doesn't make threats. That's not her style." He met my gaze directly. "She was warning you. In her own way, she was actually being helpful, making sure you understand what it means to be associated with me." "I understand plenty," I said tightly. "I understand that your family disputes involve hospitalized managers and territorial wars. I understand that your mother thinks I'm your mistress. And I understand that somehow my daughter has become a potential target in a game I never wanted to play." Alexander's face hardened. "Lily will never be harmed. I would die before allowing that to happen." The fierce conviction in his voice should have reassured me. Instead, it only underscored the danger surrounding us. "That's not good enough, Alexander. I can't risk her safety, no matter how much protection you offer. What are you saying?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm saying maybe this was a mistake. The job, the townhouse, all of it." I stared out the window at the passing city lights, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. I was naive to think I could step into your world without consequences. Alexander was silent for so long, I thought he might not respond. Then, without warning, he tapped on the partition. "Drive around the park. We need time." The driver nodded, changing course smoothly. Alexander turned to face me fully, his expression intense. "Do you know why I approached you that night, Emma? Why I couldn't just ignore a wrong number from a desperate mother?" I shook my head, caught off guard by the sudden shift. "Because I recognized something in your text. The fierce determination to protect your child, regardless of cost to yourself." His eyes held mine. "I grew up watching my father destroy everything he claimed to love. He built a criminal empire supposedly to provide for his family, then sacrificed that same family on the altar of his ambition." He reached out, his fingertips lightly brushing my cheek. "When I took control after his death, I swore I would be different, that I would protect what matters without destroying it in the process." His voice lowered. "And from the moment I saw you standing in that doorway, defiant despite your fear, I knew you mattered." My breath caught. "Alexander, let me finish." His hand dropped to take mine, his grip warm and sure. "I understand your fear. It's justified. But walking away now won't make you or Lily safer. The moment you entered my life, you became visible to people like my mother, like the Donovans. Leaving won't erase that visibility." The truth of his words sank in, heavy and undeniable. "So what do we do? You stay. Not just as my employee, but by my side, where I can protect you both properly." His eyes burned with intensity. "Let me make this absolutely clear, Emma. You and Lily are not liabilities to me. You're my strength, my purpose beyond simply dismantling my father's criminal legacy." I stared at him, stunned by the naked emotion in his voice. This was Alexander, stripped of his careful control, his practiced distance. "I need time to think," I said finally. He nodded once, releasing my hand reluctantly. "Of course." He tapped the partition again, instructing the driver to take us home. We rode in silence after that, each lost in our own thoughts. When we reached my townhouse, Alexander walked me to the door, maintaining a respectful distance. "Thank you for tonight," I said awkwardly, keys in hand. "Despite everything, Emma." His voice stopped me as I was about to enter. Whatever you decide, know this. I will never stop protecting you and Lily. Never. The fierce promise in his eyes made something deep inside me shiver. Not with fear, but with a dangerous, compelling hope. I nodded once, then slipped inside, closing the door between us with a soft click that somehow felt momentous, as if I were closing one chapter and opening another. Inside, Mrs. Kozlov greeted me with a knowing look. She'd begun watching Lily regularly when I worked late, becoming almost like family in the process. "The little one sleeps," she informed me quietly. "Had good day at school. Made painting for you." She nodded toward a colorful creation drying on the counter, a house, a smiling child, and what appeared to be two adult figures standing close together. My heart constricted at the sight. Despite my efforts to maintain boundaries between my work life and home life, Lily had clearly picked up on the growing connection between Alexander and me. He'd visited several times, always bringing small, thoughtful gifts for Lily, never extravagant toys, but books, art supplies, educational games that showed he was paying attention to her development, her interests. "Thank you for staying late," I told Mrs. Kozlov. She waved away my thanks. "Is nothing. The boss, he called earlier. Check everything okay." She gave me an appraising look. Meeting with his mother, not easy, I think. I smiled tiredly. That's an understatement. "Irina Sokolov is complicated, woman." Mrs. Kozlov shook her head. "Loves her son, but cannot understand his heart, cannot see he wants something better." "You've known them a long time," I observed, "since Alexander was boy." She nodded, her eyes distant with memory. "I see everything. The father so cold, the mother so ambitious, the boy, always watching, learning, planning for something different." She patted my hand. "He find his way now. With you, maybe." Her simple faith left me speechless. After she left, I checked on Lily, sleeping peacefully with Mr. Flopsy clutched to her chest. Watching her innocent face, I knew I stood at a crossroads. Walk away from Alexander, return to our struggle, our vulnerability, but also to a simpler, safer life. Or stay, accept his protection, his growing place in our lives, and the complicated, dangerous world that came with him. Block 5. Morning brought clarity. I woke before dawn, my mind settled after a night of restless contemplation. Lily still slept peacefully, unaware of the momentous decision I'd reached in the quiet hours. I dressed carefully in a simple gray dress, professional but elegant, and called Alexander. "I need to see you," I said when he answered on the first ring. "Before work. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he replied without hesitation. True to his word, exactly 20 minutes later his car pulled up outside. I asked Mrs. Kozlov, who had arrived early at my request, to watch Lily, then stepped outside to meet him. Alexander stood beside the Bentley, more casual than I typically saw him in dark jeans and a black cashmere sweater. The early morning light softened his features, making him appear younger, more vulnerable somehow. "Walk with me," I suggested, nodding toward the small park at the end of the block. He fell into step beside me, respecting my silence as we walked. The park was deserted at this hour, dew still glistening on the grass, birds beginning their morning songs. When we reached a secluded bench beneath an oak tree, I finally turned to face him. "I've made my decision," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "But first, I need absolute honesty from you." His expression remained carefully neutral. "Ask me anything. What happened with Jake? The real story." Alexander didn't flinch. I offered him a choice: enter an exclusive rehab facility out of state with all expenses paid, or face consequences for the drugs I knew he was carrying. He chose wisely. "Did you threaten him?" "Not physically. I simply made the alternatives clear." I nodded slowly. "And the Chicago situation, the Donovans?" Now his expression hardened slightly. "A business dispute that will be resolved through negotiation, not violence. I've already arranged a meeting with their leadership. Can you promise me, truly promise, that you're moving away from the criminal aspects of your family business? That you're not just telling me what I want to hear?" Alexander stepped closer, his eyes intense. I've spent 5 years systematically dismantling my father's criminal empire while building legitimate businesses to replace that income. It's not a simple process. There are entrenched interests, old loyalties, expectations from people like my mother. His voice lowered. But yes, I can promise you that every action I take moves toward legitimacy, away from the world my father built. I searched his face, looking for any hint of deception. I found none. Then I'm staying, I said simply. Not just as your employee, but... I hesitated, suddenly uncertain how to define what was developing between us. Alexander closed the remaining distance between us, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. But as mine, he finished softly, if that's what you want. The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent warmth spreading through my chest. After years of belonging to no one, of having no one truly claim me as their own, Alexander's certainty was intoxicating. Yes, I whispered, but I have conditions. His lips curved slightly. Name them. Lily comes first, always. Her safety, her well-being, her future. They're non-negotiable. Agreed, no hesitation. What else? Honesty between us, even when it's difficult. I need to know what I'm facing, what dangers might touch our lives. He nodded once. Done. And? I took a deep breath. If things between us develop, I won't be kept in a gilded cage. I want partnership, not ownership. I'll accept your protection, but not at the cost of my independence. Alexander's eyes darkened, his thumb brushing lightly across my lower lip. You misunderstand me, Emma. I don't want to cage you. I want to stand beside you. His voice dropped lower. I want to watch you fly, knowing you'll always return to me. The raw emotion in his voice left me breathless. This man, with all his power and danger, was offering me something I'd never truly had before. Choice along with security, freedom alongside protection. Then we have a deal, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. His other hand came up to frame my face. Sealed with this, he murmured, and then his lips were on mine. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When I responded, sliding my hands up his chest to his shoulders, it deepened into something more urgent, more consuming. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me against the solid warmth of his body, as if he couldn't bear any space between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. I've wanted to do that since I first saw you standing in your doorway, he admitted, his voice rough. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. What took you so long? His answering smile, genuine, unguarded, transformed his face. I was waiting for you to decide, Emma. This had to be your choice. In that moment, I realized just how completely I'd misjudged him at the beginning. Yes, Alexander Sokolov was dangerous, powerful, capable of violence when necessary. But he was also a man of surprising honor, of deep loyalty, of respect for boundaries that mattered. We walked back to the townhouse hand in hand, making plans. Alexander would accelerate his legitimate business expansions, distancing us further from the criminal elements. I would continue as his executive assistant, but now openly acknowledged as more, his partner, his woman. Lily would remain in her new school with additional security measures so subtle she would never notice them. When we reached the door, I hesitated. What about your mother, and others like her who won't approve? Alexander's expression hardened momentarily. My mother will accept my choices, or she will maintain her distance. As for the others, he shrugged one powerful shoulder. They're irrelevant. I am not my father, beholden to the old ways and old loyalties. My family, you and Lily, comes first. The simple declaration settled over me like a protective cloak. And the Donovans will understand, after our meeting tomorrow, that peace is more profitable than war. His confidence was absolute. I'm building something that will last, Emma. Something legitimate that we can pass on without shame. 6 months later, his words proved prophetic. The Chicago situation resolved through a complex business arrangement that benefited both families while shifting operations firmly into legal territory. Alexander's mother, initially frosty, gradually warmed to me after witnessing her son's absolute devotion, and after Lily charmed her with innocent questions in the Russian Mrs. Kozlov had been teaching her. We moved into Alexander's home, with the top floor redesigned as Lily's own space. A bedroom with star projections on the ceiling, a playroom filled with carefully chosen toys, and a small art studio where she spent hours creating increasingly sophisticated paintings. I continued working as Alexander's executive assistant, my presence at his side now understood by everyone in his orbit as both professional and personal. The clear boundaries I maintained earned respect even from those who had initially viewed me with suspicion. One evening, a year to the day after my accidental text, Alexander took me to the rooftop garden he'd had installed at his downtown office building. Under a canopy of fairy lights, with the city glittering below us, he knelt and opened a small velvet box. "A year ago, fate brought you to me through a wrong number," he said, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. It was the most right-wrong thing that ever happened to me. He took my hand. "Emma Reese, will you be my wife? Will you and Lily be my family, officially and forever?" The diamond caught the light, not ostentatiously large, but perfect in clarity and cut, just like the man offering it. "Yes," I said without hesitation. Later that night, lying in his arms, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if I hadn't mistyped Jake's number that night?" I asked. Alexander's arms tightened around me. "I don't believe in coincidences, Emma. I believe we were meant to find each other." His lips brushed my temple. "Some connections are written in the stars long before we recognize them." "The Mafia boss and the single mom?" I teased gently. "Hardly a conventional love story." "Former Mafia boss," he corrected, his fingers trailing lazily up my spine. "Current legitimate businessman. Future husband and father." The casual inclusion of father made my heart swell. Alexander had become a steadying presence in Lily's life, never overstepping but always there, helping with homework, attending school events, teaching her to ride the bicycle he'd carefully selected for her last birthday. "She adores you, you know," I murmured, thinking of how Lily's face lit up whenever Alexander entered a room. "The feeling is mutual." His voice was soft in the darkness. "I never expected to love a child who wasn't my blood, but Lily..." He paused, searching for words. "She showed me a kind of love I didn't know existed." I propped myself up on one elbow to look at his face, barely visible in the moonlight filtering through the windows. "And me? What did I show you?" His hand came up to cup my cheek, a gesture that had become precious and familiar. "You showed me possibility, Emma. The possibility of a different kind of strength than my father possessed. The possibility of protecting without controlling. The possibility of a future untainted by the past." He drew me down for a kiss, tender and deep. "You showed me home." As I settled back against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear, I thought about that fateful night, a wrong number sent in desperation. A mysterious benefactor appearing at my door, a choice that changed everything. Sometimes the wrong number leads you exactly where you're meant to be.